Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. And we are the group 8, and our topic is community preparedness plan, learning competency, specific learning outcomes, and school disaster management plan. And I am Johanna Mapayag, the first reporter in this topic. Community preparedness. It is never too late to institute a disaster preparedness plan within your community. Public health and safety in the event of disaster are increased as plans are devised and implemented. Tips included in this effective practice can also be modified to create a disaster preparedness plan within your community. And disaster often strikes without warning. It means it is never too late to have disaster plan in place in your community because a disaster often strike without warning. And making a clear plan of action is the greatest way to prepare for a disaster. As a greater catastrophe preparedness is adapted, public health and safety improve. Next is action. Arrange meetings of community members through the Development Community Disaster Preparedness Committee or through another civic association. For example, the civic society networks in each of the 14 municipal corporations and work together to develop a community disaster preparedness plan in your respective community. And next is community warning system. Community members should establish and know their local warning system. In the event of a disaster, local radio and television stations will provide information on evacuation routes, temporary shelters, and other emergency procedures, which means communities should be aware of their local warning system. Local radio and television station will provide information on evacuation routes, temporary shelters, and other emergency procedures. And next is members with special skills or equipment. Identify members of the community who have special skills like medical, technical, or equipment that they would be willing to share in the event of an emergency. It means identify individuals of the community who have specific skills like medical, technological, or equipment that they are willing to contribute in the case of an emergency. Consider CPR and first aid training for community volunteers. Next is a neighborhood directory. Create a list of home and work phone numbers and email addresses for all community members, noting contact information and plans for children and seniors who may be home alone during emergency situations. It means make a list of all community members' home and work phone numbers and email addresses, as well as contact information and plans for youngsters and elders who may be at home alone during an emergency. Next is members with special needs. Identify members of the community who may need special assistance during an emergency. And these members might include seniors, individuals who are hearing or mobility impaired, and children who are home alone, and develop a plan to assist them during an emergency. Which means determine which people of the community may require particular support in the event of an emergency. And seniors, those with hearing or mobility impairments, and youngsters who are home alone are example of these members, and make a strategy to help them in an emergency.
Good day everyone. I am Mohalidin S. Mangantang, BSc Ditobi, and I am one of the reporter in this topic, and this is our continuation. Members with special skills or equipment. Identify members of the community who have special skills, medical and technical or equipment that they will be willing to share in event of an emergency. Consider CPR and first aid training for community volunteers. Property protection. Community members should have working fire extinguishers and know how to shut off their utilities such as gas, electricity, and water in the event of an emergency. Evacuation procedures. Develop a neighborhood evacuation plan. Contact the local emergency management office and find out ahead of time what evacuation routes have been designated for your area. Distribute maps to community members. Make an evacuation plan for your area. Contact your local emergency management agency ahead of time to learn about evacuation routes in your region. Distribute maps of residents to learn the primary and alternate routes out of your region in advance of a calamity. Local shelters. Provide the location of all country shelters to community members. Shelters are often located in public school buildings. Include their pet policies if possible. Also, identify any community members who would be willing to provide shelter to others in an emergency. Give community people the location of all country shelters, if possible. Provide their pet regulation. Shelters are frequently placed in public school buildings. Identify any community members who would be willing to give emergency refuge to others.
Good day, I am Norhaya M. Gapor from BSCD2B. The topic that I'm going to discuss about School Disaster Management Plan. Disaster Management Plan. A disaster is a natural or man-made hazard causing loss of life or loss of property. It causes due to poor construction, lack of earthquake resistance feature, and lack of preparedness. Management plan is a preparation to mitigate the impact of a disaster through any hazard. And the aim and objective of the plan first is to collect all the information needed for effective management of disaster in schools, to establish an emergency response system in school, to prepare the school community for any emergency response, to define roles and responsibilities for effective response, to create awareness and build the capacity of school community, to implement mitigation activities in school, to promote partnership among various stakeholders. Section 2. Hazard, Risk, and Vulnerability Assessment. Hazards are events or physical conditions that have the potential to cause fatalities, injuries, property damage, infrastructure damage, agricultural loss, and damage to environment, interruption of business, or other type of harm or loss. Risk is the relative degree of probability that a hazardous event will occur. Risk is defined as the probability of meeting danger or suffering harm or loss. Vulnerability is a condition wherein human settlements, buildings, agriculture, or human health are exposed to a disaster by virtue of their construction or proximity to hazardous terrain. The aim of hazard, risk, and vulnerability assessment is to make risk-based choices of alternate unwanted outcomes of any hazard and to address vulnerabilities, mitigate hazards, and to prepare for response. It is done to anticipate the problems and possible solutions to minimize the damage and to save lives. Non-structural assessment. Over 90% of post-earthquake damage is of non-structural in nature. The greatest number of injuries during an earthquake is caused by falling objects. So the non-structural elements are those elements of a building that will not cause a building to collapse if they fail. These elements rely on structural elements for support and include Elements such as parapets, windows, doors, interior elements such as suspended ceilings, lights, building utilities such as ACs, gas and water connection pipe and building. And structural assessment. Structural elements of buildings are the structure members of the building of which the building is composed of. And it includes foundations, columns, beams, floor system, roof system, and connection between the structural members. Section 3. Preparedness. Preparedness means performing those activities that are aimed at reducing the risk of various hazards, improving response activities, and coping capabilities. Disaster preparedness is building up of capacities before disaster situation prevails in order to reduce impacts. Institution of School Disaster Management Committee or SDMC. School must create a school disaster management committee for conducting various preparedness and mitigation activities pertaining to the response plan. And it is vital that SDMC or School Disaster Management Committee must be functional throughout the year. A school map. The school map is the essential part of the plan. It requires elemental situational analysis of whole school and its nearby premises. And there should be 3 types of maps which need to be prepared under school disaster management plan. First is school physical map. So the school physical map must include the following features. First is number of classrooms in the school, number of staff rooms, principal and vice principal's rooms, toilets and other rooms, various lab as such physics, chemistry, biology, and computer. And also playground and open space. Second is the resource map. The resource map must include the following features. First is material resources such as fire extinguisher, roof, first aid box, and etc. available within the school premises. Second is nearest available resources such as fire station, hospital, police station, civil defense office, EOC, or etc. And the last one is nearest bus stand, railway station, and auto stand. Third is evacuation map. The evacuation map must include the following features. The evacuation map must show all the stairs, door, and windows. First is the exit shall be clearly demarcated in the map. Second is it must show the various exit roads from the classroom, staff room, and etc. by arrows on the map. And the third is the map must be kept at various locations in school and it must be marked with "You are here" in red so that the user will have an idea of the nearest exit and the evacuation route if anyone who uses the map. And the last is also mark the alternative routes if possible. Annual calendar for conduction of various preparedness activities in school. So annual calendar must be prepared by school in consultation with other stakeholders for conducting various preparedness activities. This calendar will help in capacity building of students and will create awareness through various resources. Action plan for conducting mock drills. Mock drills are part of preparedness activity and it is an important component under school safety and capacity building. Therefore, mock drills must be regularly conducted in school. Capacity building and training. Capacity building and training of teachers, students, and other staff is an important aspect. For responding to any emergency situation, school community must be trained in basic disaster management skills. So the SDMC or School Disaster Management Committee must have the basic understanding of disaster management. The subcommittee Committees under SDMC must be trained in their respective fields for effective management of disaster situation. Section 4. Response. So first is hazard specific response plan. School can create its incident response system for better coordination among various committees. In case of any disaster, the incident response system could be useful for organizing and mobilizing existing manpower and resources. This is the framework which could help in coordinating and linking management. This standard framework can be used in any disaster situation for monitoring and executing responsibilities. Second is alternate arrangement for continuation of school education. After any hazard, it is vitally important to continue the routine classes of students. School must have contingency plan for providing education irrespective of hazard impact. And the third is reporting of emergencies with disasters to government. The disaster or any other emergency if occurs in school must be reported to local district administration or district EOC. The school must provide a report to district administration about the incident, number of casualty, death and time, number of affected people, how they responded to disaster, etc. in a specific format. And the last one is special provision for disabled children. The disabled are the most vulnerable people in disaster situation.